10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 346. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 346 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This is a new series we're going to start this month, and we are going back to our monthly series of looking at the playing of the masters. And this month we're going to look at Thelonious Monk, one of the greatest jazz composers who has ever lived, and an often overlooked pianist. So we're actually going to look at some of his piano playing and see what we can glean from it, see if we can learn anything new to put into our playing. But before we jump into the show, as usual, just wanted to remind you that this is a listener-supported show, which means people just like you keep the podcast going in the form of a small monthly donation. We use the Patreon platform for that. You do get a PDF of every single episode, the material in every single episode, some audio examples in exchange for your monthly donation. And you help keep the podcast coming out each and every week in high quality. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to some new patrons. Thank you to our new $5 patron, Sean, and thank you to our new $3 patron, Mike. Really appreciate you joining up. If you want to join up and support the show, go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up today, and you get instant access to the PDFs from every single episode that we have ever done, all 346 episodes. So again, that's 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners and sign up to support the show today. All right, so let's dive in. Before we actually talk about what we're looking at in this first episode of this series, I just want to talk a little bit about Monk. Monk is truly one of the greatest composers and pianists who ever lived in the history of this music. And a true testament to Monk's music is the fact that there are not many gigs that I play where we don't play at least one tune by Thelonious Monk. And this includes even if I'm on a gig where it's all original music or mostly original music, usually the only jazz standards that we play would be a Monk tune. And I think that that's a real testament to his genius. Jazz has changed a lot since Thelonious Monk was around and in his prime and making all those great records that we all know and love. But his music is just as relevant today as it was back then. And people just keep falling in love with Thelonious Monk's music. His chord progressions are some of the most interesting that I've ever heard. His melodies are second to none. They are absolutely awesome. And I have to say, there's a very, very short list of composers that people are really still playing their music on a regular basis in all kinds of different situations. Now, if you think about Thelonious Monk's timeline too, I mean, he was alive and relevant and super important through some of what I think are the most important periods of jazz. You know, he was playing bebop with the bebop masters. And then from that, he went on to lead some of the greatest bands in history. Famously, so many people were so excited to play with him and learned so much from Monk. I mean, including Johnny Griffin, John Coltrane, the list of players that went through his band and cite it as being some of the most important periods of their life playing with Thelonious Monk is just astounding. Thelonious is a great person to dive into the history of because obviously he's a very interesting individual, but his contributions to music, I think, are some of the most important in jazz history. So I just wanted to say that real quick before we dive into what we're going to look at today. So we're going to look at a short excerpt from Monk's solo on Bemsha Swing, which was one of his compositions. And this is from a Miles Davis recording Released in 1959, one of the greatest years in jazz history, and it's called Miles Davis and the Modern Jazz Giants. So that's where you'll be able to find this. And I just took a little clip from this. I think it's from his second or third chorus, but he does a lot of really interesting stuff. This starts at about right around the 6-minute mark of this particular recording. Let's check out the excerpt, and then we'll talk about some of the interesting stuff going on here. So a lot of really cool stuff going on in a very short period of time here, right? The excerpt is only 5 bars long, but there's really just a lot going on here. I want to zoom in on the third measure when he starts playing this little 16th note pattern over first a concert E flat 7 chord, and then it's moving down by half steps, yet he keeps the pattern going while he's playing this. And this pattern is really interesting. So for over a concert E flat 7, he's playing this 6, 3, 1, 7. And then he's just moving it down by half steps. And then he moves it down one more half step, right? So he goes down to D flat concert and plays. What an interesting sound, right? So why is that sound so interesting? Well, here's the thing. I really can't find any structure in that, for instance. It's not that he's superimposing a different chord over the top of it. The only thing I could possibly see is that he's playing a major 6 chord based off of the 7th with a flat 5. But I'm not even sure if that's what he was thinking, right? So was he thinking this sound, which is that major 6 chord based off of the 7th, but there's flat 5 in there? I don't know. I'm not sure if he is thinking about that. I think he might have been thinking intervallically, because if you look at what that thing is made up of, intervallically, it's really cool. He goes down a 4th, then down a whole step, then down a 3rd, a major 3rd. So you're hearing this pretty wild combination of intervals, yet all the notes fit perfectly over that chord that's being played underneath it. You see, so it's very different from if you were just to play down the chord 7, 5, 3, 1, or even 5, 3, 1, 7. Instead, it gives it a much more interesting sound. And I think it's because of that mix of intervals, that mix of fourths, a major 2nd, and a major 3rd. And this is to me, the thing that makes Monk really special is he just thinks outside of the box all the time, right? So that pattern could be really cool to bring around to a bunch of different dominant chords. You could keep doing that down by half steps and turn it into an exercise, which might unlock something under your fingers, something in your ears, just a really cool pattern. So that's the main thing that I wanted to highlight in terms of the most interesting thing that stood out to me in that particular solo excerpt. But there's a lot of other stuff in these 5 bars that we can think about, right? One of the things is how rhythmically diverse this little phrase is. If you were to look at all the different rhythmic devices that he's using as he plays through just these 5 bars, I mean, there's hours and hours of things to study as far as how he was putting together the phrase. He's using quarter notes, eighth note triplets, 16th notes, dotted notes. He's all over the place, but it fits so well together. Another thing that really strikes me about the way that Monk plays the piano is his touch. It's somehow a lot harder than a lot of other pianists, but at the same time, it sounds light and bouncy. It's just, yeah, it's kind of otherworldly the way that he plays the piano. And a lot of people have strong opinions about the way that he plays the piano. I personally absolutely love it. So there's a lot of things that you could get into. So my advice to you would be look at that section that I just talked about, where he's playing that descending line over the chords and half steps, and then try to find one or two other things that really interest you about this little excerpt. Maybe transcribe the rest of the solo, or go out and find a transcription of the rest of the solo. I just transcribed this little thing. Quite honestly, I'm going to go back and try to transcribe the whole solo, but I just didn't have time to do it for this week. But try to tear apart even just that little 4 to 5 bar thing that I've transcribed for you, and see if you could find some interesting stuff in there. All right, I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. Monk's music is some of my favorite in the world. Let me know if you have any questions. Remember, if you want to grab the PDF of that excerpt that we just listened to, you can go over to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners. Get yourself signed up today for instant access to everything that we have ever done. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you're doing well out there, staying safe and healthy, and we'll see you next week with another episode. Bye.